we get to have our kickstart at this public holiday celebrating the life of Janan Luwum, as this is the 8th year that we get to celebrate this day, the 16th of February 2023. Was he a patriot or a good spiritual leader or faith leader for that matter? And are those that are aspiring to be like him, you know, fearful or encouraged to actually live and be as vocal as he was back in the times? And of course, recalling the past times in relation to the present, is there anything different? Do we see history repeating itself over and over again, regardless of the voices of such people? Well, Janan Luwum was the Archbishop of the Church of Uganda from 1974 to 1977, and one of the most influential leaders of the modern church here in Africa. He was arrested in February 1977 and died shortly after. Although the official account describes a car crash, it is generally accepted by critics that he was murdered on the orders of then-President Idi Amin. In 1977, Archbishop Luwum delivered a note of protest to dictator Idi Amin against the policies of arbitrary killings and unexpected disappearances, something that we talk about even in present-day times. Now, shortly afterwards, the Archbishop and other leading churchmen were accused of treason, and the Archbishop was a leading voice in criticizing the excesses of Idi Amin's regime. Related scenarios have been reported in the modern state of Uganda. So has anything significant changed from then to now? Well, so many question marks follow that. Now we are joined by Honorable Ibrahim Semujonganda, who is the Member of Parliament, Chira Municipality, to help us dig into the bones of history, and perhaps through history we can find a path to a better Uganda. Good morning to you, Honorable. You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Let's talk about this day. It's 8 years running since it was made official that it's a day to recognize the impact of the church, the impact of faith on a country that has the motto "For God and my country."
While that is the official motivation, celebrating the life of Luwum, you need to understand Mr. Museveni's hatred of Idi Amin, because the circumstances under which Luwum died are not different from the circumstances of many other people. I've lost relatives, I think during Obote 2, I lost an uncle and a brother together with the vehicle they were driving. We've never seen them again. So these excesses have dotted the history of this country. Luwum should have been used just as an illustration to go into history and to commit ourselves never to repeat these things. They happened under Obote 1, they happened under Idi Amin, they happened under Obote 2, they are happening under Museveni. I don't know whether I should call it Museveni 3 because it's the 4th decade. And the motivation remains the same: power and staying in the power. You have just explained how the Archbishop got killed, presented a note to President Idi Amin complaining against disappearances and killing of people. And what Idi Amin did was to arrest of course he paraded them at Harare, and then together with Ofumbi, who was a minister, and Oriema, and said they had committed treason. What followed are the same explanations that you have today. And governments tend to behave the same way. When an Naito police officer nearly killed Dr. Kizza Besigye around Murago roundabout, we all, and the cameras of various media, showed us a policeman using a hammer to smash Dr. Kizza Besigye's windscreen. But the following day, the minister said it is Besigye who came with a hammer. They shot at Besigye. That day I was with him. We were walking from Kasangati, and they said Besigye had injured his finger. When Manenero died, that time Nobu Mayombo, the late, was the chief of military intelligence. He said, I was the one helping him to take him to Murago. Recently, we have had Mzee kidnapped from Kasese, and he has died. So the explanation, the pattern remains the same. The motivation remains the same. Idi Amin, when he captured power, people celebrated because they were tired of Obote. And there were gestures of goodwill, the return of Sir Edward Mutesa's body, the freeing of, even Idi Amin freed prisoners. Something that Okero Rutwa did. I was helping Brigadier Sebaga write his book. Said as soon as Tito Okero Rutwa overthrew Obote in 1985, the first thing he did was to free everybody in Ruzira. So governments come the same way in Uganda. Unfortunately, this one hasn't gone. They behave the same way, and all the past governments have gone the same way. We had an opportunity under Mr. Museveni for all this to change. I remember the late Elia Katega, I had a conversation with him a number of times, and his wish, and he kept saying so, was that things must be done differently. So this day, celebrating the life of Luwum, should have been a day of human rights stock taking, the things that have happened in the past, and the commitment never to repeat them, because it's still possible to live the same life without having to injure other people. President Museveni, I used to work at Monitor when I left university, and he faced the question of his legacy all the time. And he kept saying him is a revolutionary, he doesn't care about the legacy. And I think this day, February 16th of 2023 has come at the worst time, when Mr. Museveni is accused of committing human rights violations that Idi Amin committed. And I've told people, for me it hurts. Some of the soldiers who served under Idi Amin are forgivable. People who never went to school, no experience, no training, and they ended up with a lot of power. But majority of commanders today are people who, some of them have even master's degree in law. General Mohoz, who was commanding the army, who was CDF until recently, I am told he has a master's degree in law. Kaihura, who commanded the police, and all these things happened under his watch, is a lawyer. You hear people with first degrees like Muzei Sabit, who was in the police, first class degree in mathematics. These are the people we are talking about. So they cannot be forgiven because they understand, they have gone to school, they understand the value, they have visited countries, they know the repercussions of their own action, but they continue behaving. Because Luwum, the difference between Luwum and Manenero and the Mzee kidnapped from Kasese, the difference is just the profile. That this guy had the courage even to kill the Archbishop. But lives remain the same. If you shoot people, I remember when Sheikh Chirevu was killed, the justification was that he was running away. Can you run away from counter-terrorism who have attacked your house at night, and UPDF, and one single soul is running away from them? They correct people from all over Kampala, then go and kill them in Namuongo, people who are in handcuffs, and they say they are running away. So the explanation of the Amin regime was that the Archbishop, together with the Ofumbi and Oriema, the ministers, that they are trying to overpower a driver who was driving them to an interrogation center. Okay. So the explanation remains the same. The explanation remains the same. Yeah. The script seemingly has remained the same. We are joined by Honorable Medad Segona, who is also here to help us understand and maybe untie the strings of history, perhaps, as we get to memorize Janan Luwum Day today, the 16th of February 2023. You're most welcome, Honorable.
Thank you and good morning, and to my brother, the Honorable Samaju, good morning. Sorry I ran late. I didn't know Makerere was still conducting business on a public holiday, and I got trapped. I'm not like my brother who stays in town. For me, I'm a village guy coming all the way from Bodo, and good morning to our viewers.
What does this day signify for us as Uganda in terms of politics, in terms of our rights as humans?
Well, differently, but what brings us together is that we lost a Ugandan in form of Archbishop Janan Luwum, more than other Ugandans probably. For me, I lost a spiritual leader who was murdered, and the explanation was that he died in an accident. I think the significance of celebrating today is celebrating a life that was lived well. Somebody who sacrificed his life, gave his blood and bones for humanity. Because for heaven's sake, Archbishop Janan Luwum, as a person, was not being targeted by Idi Amin. I mean, given his profile, etc., he could afford to keep quiet, like many are doing today. And I think following the footsteps of Christ, whom he accepted, he chose to speak against injustice. And that's how he met his death. I was not there. Yoweri Museveni tells us that Idi Amin killed Archbishop Janan Luwum. I don't look forward to a day when people will be saying Yoweri Museveni killed the following people. Whenever we raise this issue of human rights, the people in power tell us that we are bringing foreign concepts, and therefore they have no business respecting lives of humans. But you know, Museveni promised us, I don't know whether you were born then when he was coming, that he had come to bring an end to state-inspired violence.
Extrajudicial killing.
Extrajudicial killings. By the way, you may even find that even Amin, in some respects, were not doing extrajudicial killings, because he would take people to what he called the tribunion, meaning a tribunal, the military tribunal. They would be tried and killed summarily, like you saw the soldiers in Karamoja, who were accused of being, of having killed a priest. So even today, we still experience the same. The difference, one, is Amin is dead. I hope that Museveni's life is not Amin's resurrection, that we have Amin in a new style. Because how do you explain people who have disappeared, and the stories we hear is that they have been fed onto crocodiles in Rwamayuba, is that people are dying in a military barracks, in a go-down in Imbuya. How do you explain that? How do you explain, I mean, Honorable Semju has mentioned the Sheikh Chilevu, who was living in my constituency in Nsanji. A man who was picked from his house, handcuffed from his house, made to sit in front of his house with his children watching, placed down on the floor and shot to death. How do you explain that? And then you have a president who comes out to defend that kind of thing. Talking about other human rights, I have seen journalists, and that's why I mentioned about the silence of some people. Journalists being clobbered. And you know, you have a president, I hope he's a president, who comes out and says, oh, he was mistaken to have stolen a camera. A journalist with his jacket and holding his cameras, with his hands up like this, he's beaten. And you have Museveni saying, oh no, maybe they suspected him for a camera thief. You have people like Yasin Kauma, who were shot and killed by Museveni's soldiers in cold blood. And Museveni comes out to defend that. So forget about human rights, as long as Museveni reigns. That should not stop the rest of us from undertaking to do our work. Agitation, advocacy, defense through litigation, and any other means possible. And I want to appreciate, I think IGP Okoth-Ochola, who said, if someone comes to arrest you in plain clothes, he refuses to identify himself, stone him. So I think the different means may be deployed by different people, judging from the circumstances and conditions, how they meet you. So if they find you, they violate your rights, and you're in a position to defend yourself. Defend yourself, because you're defenseless. We are defenseless.
Okay, all right. Well, those are his opening remarks, and now we get to look at the power, the injustices, and the recurrence of the script. Now, Honorable Semuji, you did mention education, and you alluded to all these people who have done these injustices to some
Probably I
of these
can add on that.
Yes.
General Tinyefunza has a master's degree in law. Notwithstanding that he apologized. Do you remember his record in human rights violations? I appreciate one thing, that he came out boldly, was man enough to apologize. Brigadier Nobo Mayombo had a master's in human rights, and you remember his record. May his soul rest where God placed him. Okay? General Kaihura was a law teacher and was teaching human rights. So many stories that you can talk about. Even Museveni himself, we are told he has a degree, because for some 2 years he was at Dar es Salaam. I mean, you cannot compare him with Idi Amin, who went, I think, up to P4.
Therefore, with the heart of education, you would think that their reasoning is much more wise and much more cordial towards their
That even if you are to do silly
leadership.
things, you do them differently.
So can we then rightfully say that education is not necessarily, a voice of reason, Honorable Semuju?
You see, the point I made earlier, if you have the same appetite for power like Idi Amin, even your education will be battling with you. Because Mr. Museveni, after capturing power, his proposal during the first meeting of the commanders was that maybe 2 years, after 2 years, where should we be in power? From 2 years to 4 to 9, Museveni is still here after 37 years in power. Even if you are such a very good leader, the citizens will get tired whether you have done miracles, and once they get tired, you will never reverse that. So the reason educated people are behaving like Idi Amin's soldiers who are being picked from Kampala streets, it is because the appetite for power remains the same. Mr. Museveni doesn't want to go, even when the population says, please, you must go. That's why he will organize elections, beat everybody who is competing against him, arrest supporters who are just expressing support, and in the extreme cases, even kill. The killings in November 2020 in Kampala after the arrest of Honorable Kyagulanyi were killing because Mr. Museveni was stretched to the limit. He saw power sleeping, and then he said, okay, now
let's send a message.
This is going to be the response. That's what Idi Amin did. And I don't think method that they can do these things wisely, because even Idi Amin started very well.
Yes.
In fact, he had his cabinet, the first cabinet of Idi Amin, had the highest number of PhD holders and professors in the history of Uganda.
Okay. So I guess it's then very paramount that we perhaps turn to faith to show us things can actually be done in a proper way.
I imagine today that you are Church of Uganda celebrating the life of Luwum, and then you have Museveni as a guest of honor. Because you see the church, and I don't want to blame the church, but I have seen the church doing much more than the church and the mosque are doing in Uganda. People who stopped Bakiri Muruzi,
the previous church.
Yeah. People who stopped Bakiri Muruzi from hanging and holding on to power in Malawi were led by the church. Those who stopped Kaunda were led by the church in Zambia. The church,
even more
in South Africa.
So as you speak of the church, we actually do have a spiritual leader that has joined us for this discussion in Chaliwajale this morning. Stephen Bite is actually at the home of Reverend Canon Aaron Mwesije, who is the Director of Religious Affairs at the Directorate of Ethics and Integrity, and we want to hear of him as we get to look at the life and the impact of the death of Archbishop Janan Luwum, and on this significant day, the importance of the church being a voice of reason for what is happening in our country, past, present, and perhaps future. Good morning to you, Stephen.
Yes, good morning to you, Priscilla. This is Chaliwajala. In fact, if Archbishop Janan Jakaria Luwum wasn't murdered today, it's now 26 years of course after his death, or his we believe after he was murdered. And here I'm going to be speaking to Reverend Canon Dr.
Not doctor, please.
Reverend Aaron Mwesige. He is the Director of Ethics in charge of religious affairs in the Office of the President. He's also a former Provincial Secretary of the Church of Uganda. Good morning to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us on Morning at NTV.
Good morning, sir, and good morning, listeners.
Now, Reverend Canon, as we speak now, there are learners who woke up today preparing to go to school, and they were surprised that today they're not going to be going to school. There are people who are working, and when they hit the road, some didn't find traffic jam. They were surprised. There are those who are staying home, but they don't know the essence as to why they are staying home. They just know it's Janan Luwum Day. Which kind of person are we talking about? The character and the person of Janan Luwum.
Thank you so much. Good morning, all of you viewers and NTV staff. My name is Reverend Canon Aaron Mwesige. I am a former Provincial Secretary of the Church of Uganda, and I'm currently working as the Director Ethics in charge of Religious Affairs, Office of the President. Now, that question that my colleague has asked is very fundamental. Why is today a public holiday? How did it come to be? Yet there are so many people who have died, and some are religious leaders, some are political, but it has not been made a public holiday. What is special with Janan Luwum? It sparks, first of all, the public holiday was declared on 16th February 2015 by His Excellency the President of Uganda, when he attended a memorial service, a commemoration service at Muchwini in Wigweng, in Kitgum, where the body of Janan Luwum was buried on the 19th of February 1977. Remember, he was murdered on the 16th of February 1977 by Idi Amin, and he was taken and buried on the 19th of February. Now, where he was buried is a place where we converge to commemorate, to remember the life. So why is it significant? Number one, this man was not only an archbishop. First of all, he got saved. He was born in 1924, yes, and he accepted Christ as his personal Savior and Lord in 1948, which actually changed his life as an individual. That was very significant, and that was the beginning of his work in ministry after getting converted to Christianity in 1948. But then later on, of course, he rose through the ranks. He trained abroad, and in Uganda, he became a bishop of Northern Uganda, a provincial secretary of the Church of Uganda, a bishop of Northern Uganda, and later on he becomes an archbishop. In 1974, during the time when he was replacing Archbishop Erika Sabiti, of whom he served with as his provincial secretary. Now, when he became the archbishop, Janan Luwum preached the gospel of Christ crucified in and out of season. He actually unreservedly and selflessly preached the gospel of Christ. But remember, that was the time of the regime of Idi Amin, who was not only a Muslim and who wanted even to Islamize this country, but at the same time who was a dictator and who was actually even less educated. Amin was very good. He was a president who did some tremendous work, but on top of that, there were so many factors that surrounded his presidency that made him behave in a way that was not attracting public attention. In a way that was attracting public attention. Now, so his murder was a bit unique, very unique. Murdering an archbishop, first of all, I think this in office, you see, this was almost the second archbishop to be murdered in office, I think next to Kuranma, which happened way back in the 16th century. So it was in Africa, such has never been happened, murdering an archbishop. So when he was murdered, this galvanized the entire international community and the national community to put their efforts in place to remove the regime of Idi Amin, and who was later on, after 3 years. So in other words, if I may answer you correctly, because I haven't answered you, the importance of this day, why it is a public holiday, it is because we are celebrating, one, the murder of an archbishop who was murdered in a manner that was unusual, first of all, by a president. Now, a president murdering an archbishop is something very unique, and then requires public attention, both church and nation at large, which has. So we have been having archbishops in this country. We've been having bishops in this country, Pentecostals, Muslims, religious leaders, but we have never experienced such a time. So that time that sparked the murder is the one that actually made the government of Uganda and the religious leaders in Uganda to say, wait a minute, we need to celebrate the life of Archbishop Janan in a special way, and we declare his day when he died a public holiday, so that people would remember and honor him as someone who died as a martyr, died for his faith, because, you know, his wife told him to move. When the situation became tense, his wife suggested, why don't we move and run away in exile? He said, no, if I'm to die,
let me die here.
Let me die here and die for my faith and for my people.
Looking at what is happening now, if Janan Luwum was to come back, of course we've had activists, politicians coming out and say that religious leaders today have, the way they act, the way they speak, there is a loud silence on issues affecting the people, issues like human rights, abductions, and allegations of torture, or the scenes that we see people coming out, their chests bare, having marks, visible marks of torture. That wouldn't please Janan Luwum today.
Exactly. It wouldn't please him at all, as much as it is not pleasing others. I think, as you know, the church is the custodian of faith and human values. The church is the voice of the voiceless. A religious leader like Janan Luwum would have spoken even at the age of 99, because now, born in 1924, he would be 99. And as you know, church leaders are like soldiers. They don't retire, and they don't expire until death. So he would still vehemently speak against the injustices that exist in our country, and human rights violations, the vices that exist, like homosexuality we are talking in the church, that has penetrated both the church and the state from the Western world. A man of Luwum would actually not fear, because if he never feared to speak during the time of Idi Amin, and he spoke his word and remained strong, because he was very resilient, he had to withstand Amin's threat. He would as well speak, because he was the voice of the voiceless. He would actually speak vehemently, and he would act.
Hard for the current church leaders, be it from across all religious sections. Why do we hear loud silence from them when they see such acts going on? But when it came to homosexuality, they came out vehemently and spoke out. But other issues, they've been so silent for some good time.
Are you talking of Uganda or other
Uganda
countries?
Particularly. Let's speak to Uganda.
I am a former provincial secretary of the Church of Uganda. I worked with Archbishop Henry Lukorombi, and of course I've been monitoring those who became archbishops after him. There was Archbishop Ntagari, now Archbishop Kazimba. I want to tell you that Archbishop Orombi vehemently spoke against corruption on pulpit. Archbishop Ntagari did the same. Kazimba has spoken the same. Fellow bishops have been actually attacking corruption and also attacking abuse of human rights in this country. I've read it in papers. I have heard it on the pulpit. I have heard it on social media. And it's not that today Archbishop Kazimba has come to speak against homosexuality. No. In fact, the Church of Uganda and other African Anglican churches broke away from the Anglican Church mainstream, the Anglican Communion, in 2003, if you are not aware, when one of the bishops was declared himself as a homosexual. I think it was Gene Robinson. And that was the genesis of the breakaway from the Anglican Communion. So I still recall vividly that I attended GAFCON, which is Global Anglican Future Conference in Jerusalem, made up of so many bishops and archbishops, including my archbishop, coming up with a framework to attack the Anglican Communion on the basis of homosexuality. But secondly, they were not speaking against homosexuality. Here back in Uganda, religious leaders were actually speaking against vices like human rights abuse, like corruption. I think they have been using the pulpit. Well, I think maybe the media houses have not been active, or you have not been following them, okay, but they have been doing it, including myself. I think I've written a lot against homosexuality, no against corruption in this country, okay, working with ethics and integrity.
As we switch back to studio for a short commercial break, I want us to wind up this conversation. But
yes,
you speaking to because of the day, speaking to the people, speaking to the leaders, and especially those in church, because they have congregations on Saturday, on Sunday, and every day. What should their responsibility be as far as
this day is
the
concerned?
Steps of Janan?
Yes, as far as this day is concerned, as I said, the nature of how Luwum died, okay, the purpose, the reason why he died, is the one that makes this day significant. The way he was killed. Yes, in other words, why? Yeah. So the way he died, the kind of personality he was, as someone who died of faith, actually mattered, because the Church of England was in Canterbury was the first one to make him a 20th century martyr. In England, he was made a 20th century martyr. I think it was,
and the statue was erected.
And the statue was erected in the Lambeth Conference of 1978. So, being made a martyr, excuse me, Church of Uganda also had to think, wait a minute, if other people can recognize Archbishop Janan Luwum as a 20th century martyr, why not we at home? So I think you can see the international community was not happy with the nature of his death. Now that one is the one that makes this day very significant. But what is it that we can learn so that we can preach to the people? What message can we pass across? One, the message of reconciliation, the message of unity, because you see, the death of an archbishop killed like that brought unity in the country. So the people should speak against vices like murder, like corruption, like violation of human rights, because Archbishop Janan Luwum, if he was still alive, as you rightly asked,
okay,
he would be speaking against.
Reverend Kanuna, very finally, how can the country avoid scenarios that, like when we saw what happened to Luwum, because the murders, the killings, the abductions, how can the public, the leaders, how can they avoid it? This is a question that is also pertinent, because we see some scenarios happening here and there. How can we avoid this?
One, we should actually preach the message of unity as Ugandans, and I think Uganda is a tribal country, if you are not aware. I think Professor Mamdan said that Uganda is not a nation. You listen to this. Is a group of tribes forced to live together by circumstances of the age. Now, sometimes people like Archbishop Janan Luwum and other religious leaders or other important people die as a result of tribal sentiments. Some are tribal, some are religious, but I want to say that the message we should preach now to avoid such a scenario to happen is a message of unity as a country, message of reconciliation, and so that we can reconcile one another. For instance, reconciling the regime of Idi Amin, who was from the north, now the Kakwa and the Acholi, because you know Luwum was an Acholi. Now you are not looking at Luwum as an Acholi, no, as an archbishop, and Amin as a president. You also go to the tribal issue, you see. Okay. So I think this the death of Luwum at such a time would bring an environment of unity, environment of reconciliation, environment to preach the gospel, because let me tell you, the gospel does not inform, but it also transforms people's lives.
Thank you so much, Reverend Canon Aaron Mwesje, the Director of Ethics in charge of religious affairs in the Office of the President, is also the former Provincial Secretary for the Church of Uganda, and it is a public holiday, the Luwum Janan Luwum Day. And we know that in Uganda we have a Luwum Street, but also in London they have a statue that was erected in front of the church in Westminster Abbey. We go for a short commercial break. Kusila Regina will be back with more guests in the studios for more conversations on Janan Luwum Day.
It's still an informative morning here. Morning at NTV. I am Priscilla Regina Naloga, looking at the life of Archbishop Janan Luwum. And the day was 16th February 1977. Now, on this very same day, President Idi Amin announced that a plot to assassinate him and overthrow his government had been uncovered. He claimed that the weapons to be used in the coup had been found at the Kampala home of the Archbishop Janan Luwum and near the home of then Bishop Iona Okoth in Toro. Now, a number of people were arrested in connection to the coup plot then, prominent of whom were Archbishop Luwum and, of course, two other ministers, Charles Oboth Ofombi and Erinayo Wilson Oriema. 2 days later, Radio Uganda actually announced that the trio had been killed in an accident on Tanan Avenue in Nakasero, just here in Kampala. Few people actually believed those media reports, and many assumed that Idi Amin had ordered their execution. Now, Gillian Nantime spoke to Godfrey Oboth Ofombi, one of the sons of the late minister, about the events that led to that harrowing time.
Driving into the late Charles Oboth Ofombi's farm, one senses the triumph of the human spirit over adversity. The 3,000-acre farm is in Nyamalogo village, Siwa sub-county, in Tororo district. Oboth Ofombi, who was Minister of Internal Affairs, was murdered on February 16, 1977, together with his close friends, Archbishop Janan Luwum and Lieutenant Colonel Erinayo Oriema, the Minister of Lands, Housing and Physical Planning. The 10-bedroom house Oboth Ofombi had been constructing is still standing, incomplete, most of the property looted, and what is left in a state of disrepair. But there are memories in this home. From the late 1960s and 70s, the minister presided over life here. Now Godfrey Oboth Ofombi, his son, lives here with a few workers. For a long time, after his father's death, he lived in Nairobi, Kenya, and then later Los Angeles in the US. After years in the civil service, in 1971, Oboth Ofombi was appointed Minister of Defense. By 1973, he had been transferred to the Internal Affairs docket. It was a time when the academia, intellectuals, and elites fled into exile, but Oboth Ofombi remained.
He would always complain and say, you know, all my friends are telling me, run away. They're telling me, come on, he's going to kill you too. He'll do this and that. But I won't run. I'll stay. If he kills me, he kills me. He just said, no, I'll just believe in God. If that's how it's meant to be, then it's God's will.
President Idi Amin and Oboth Ofombi had been close friends since the mid-1960s. when Amin was a colonel in the Uganda Army and Oboth Fumbi was Secretary of Defense.
I do remember the first time I ever saw Amin, personally, was when he came to the house in Nakasero. He wasn't even president. He was the army commander at the time, yeah. Big, I remember his big hands and so on. Jolly. He was very jolly towards children. Even when he came here, he was very jolly because he came here 4 times and he slept here. Not in this house, but the old house, which used to be in the same location.
However, Godfrey Oboth Fumbi says his father did not rejoice when Amin captured power in 1971.
So the stick was just here somewhere.
But such was the friendship they shared that when Amin went on a state visit to Mogadishu in 1972, he left Oboth Fumbi in charge of the country as head of state for 9 days from 10th to 18th July 1972. Godfrey remembers his father as a hardworking man and strict father. Oboth Fumbi was also very prayerful. Next to his house is a church he built in memory of his father, an evangelist.
Every day in the evening there would be songs and singing. Even us being kids, like I told you, it would become annoying. We want to play, we want to watch TV, Daktari, Yogi Bear and so on, and here we are being told to pray.
By January 1977, rumors of a coup plot had gained ground in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania and Kampala. Oboth Fumbi had a premonition about his coming death and spoke to his children. Godfrey was 12 when he last saw his father.
He took us to the airport in the evening. We were flying, and that time I just left St. Andrews Turi, and I was just starting my first term in St. Mary's. And he walked us to the plane, down onto the tarmac, I remember. And then I remember turning around as I was walking up and watched him walk with his entourage out of my line of sight. That was the last time I ever saw him.
On February 16, 1977, Oboth Fumbi, Luwum, and Noriema were arrested for being part of a coup plot. Godfrey, his siblings, and their mother, Elizabeth, were at their residence in Westlands, Nairobi.
That evening, because my mom was there, she called Kampala to speak to one of my uncles, her cousin, who was also staying at the house in Kampala. And then I remember she just collapsed and started crying.
Mrs. Oboth Fumbi, who had given birth 2 weeks prior, drove back to Uganda with her bodyguard.
So when my mother reached there, the border, it was about 5 hours. Well, just a wrangle with the Kenyan authorities. They said that they will receive the call from the vice president's office not to let you go through back to Uganda because they're dead and so on. Your husband is dead and you could be killed and so on.
On February 17, 1977, an accident scene was staged on Janan Avenue in Nakasero. Now, reports from the scene indicated that while the Archbishop and the 2 ministers had died in the accident, their driver, Sergeant Moses Okello, had survived with grievous injuries. Godfrey had the news of his father's death on the BBC.
I had gone to school, got back home for lunch, and then Michael was listening to BBC. Then he said, Dad is dead. It was just...
When Mrs. Oboth Fumbi finally made it home, she found her husband's body had been brought by soldiers from the Presidential Protection Unit.
When they opened the coffin, he was in this kind of position. His hands, like as though he was defending himself from being there. And those wounds on the side of the face, and then there was stab wounds on the neck and here, and there were 33 bullet holes. This arm was broken so badly that the bone was sticking out of the flesh. It was actually sticking out of the flesh. And one of the legs also was broken.
For years, Godfrey wondered why President Amin had killed his father, who was supposed to be his closest friend.
Why would Uncle Amin do this? Why?
I don't know how to say it. How do you say sorry? At the tragic end of this.
Yeah. Jaffa, you know one thing?
I can't even say sorry on behalf of my father.
I know.
Later, he got to know about the coup plot and his father's supposed involvement in the plot.
If it was once, I'll either come back as president or dead. That's what he told them. There was a coup attempt. And that's what it is. Amin found out and he reacted the way that Amin knows how to react.
Mrs. Oboth Fumbi remained in this home, supporting her children, using proceeds from the vast farm and a jaggery factory Oboth Fumbi had built. The family also had income from rental properties in Kampala, Nairobi, and Switzerland.
That was it.
Between 1976 to 1977, the State Research Bureau foiled 11 coup attempts against President Amin, including one on June 18, 1977, where the plotters, who were mainly soldiers, attempted to assassinate Amin at Abaita Ababiri on Entebbe Road after a cabinet meeting. They almost succeeded. Gillian Nantume, NTV Tonight.
The Labradors come with black.
So many perspectives to the death of Archbishop Janan Luwum, but eminent to note is the word threat, and also the other word is reaction, something that we have been seeing recurring over the course of history, especially as far as politics is concerned. Now, the gentlemen that are joining me for this conversation have their own experiences of having received threats. And reactions have been made. Of course, so many people have wondered if the late Archbishop knew of the threats that were against his life, why didn't he run? And some have stood proudly to say that because he was convicted that he was doing the right thing, and not the right thing for himself, but the right thing for the country of Uganda. No wonder he's regarded as a martyr today. Honorable Medad Segona and of course Honorable Ibrahim Semujunganda joining me, continuing this conversation. Let me start with Honorable Medad. In regards to threats, you have your own experience. Could you share with us your own account of a threat that you received and the conviction that made you stand your ground?
Well, on 17th of July 2008, I received a call from somebody I won't mention, telling me that they were coming for me because Museveni was in Gombe launching this Bibanja Association drama of his, and said those opposed to the Land Amendment Act are going to see fire, and I'm coming. And somebody who was supposedly recruited to be part of the group that was coming did alert some of my people, and I was informed in advance that they were coming to my house. And I wanted to go home. I mean, I'm not a thief, I'm not a criminal. But I was prevailed over by a few colleagues of mine who said, no, it's late, it's in the night, don't go home. So I stayed somewhere, and in the morning I went home, dressed up to go for the Buganda conference. And I was kidnapped along Arua Park. And the following year, I think, the Buganda Debaka guy, someone alerted me that, said someone who was an old friend of my father, said you need to get your passport and take off because they're coming to kill you. They will just come and create a situation around you, shoot, and you'll be dead. And I really wondered why I should leave my country in the hands of people who I do not know whether they are Ugandans or not. I refused to go. I found my way into CPS. And indeed, somebody walked to the Minister of Internal Affairs and said, if you want this man, we can bring him. He said, no. We want to arrest him our own way. We do not want him to come. So what I did was to go by myself. And I spent a whole day in CID asking them if I have a case. And they didn't know of any case against me, but they were not allowing me to leave anyway. Perhaps God was working to protect me that way. If I had walked out of CID, I would probably be dead. Archbishop Janan Luwum stood for values. And he did not want to abandon those values. You know, when you are passionately attached to certain values, you do not want to leave those values unattended to. I believe that's the reason, and you saw Honorable Ofumbi said he would not leave because, again, of values. You know, it is very disturbing and disheartening to see some people owning up your country, and you know, we feel like I can't leave it to them. I spoke to a gentleman, well, maybe this would not be fair to mention because this man is still alive, who told me he cannot leave NRM because it is his party. Museveni was only grabbing it from him. I spoke to an old lawyer who died, who was Administrator General during Idi Amin's time.
Right.
and he informed me that he received a call 2 days to Janan Luwum's death, and Ofumbi said, you need to process Honorable Ofumbi's death gratuity because he has died in an accident. Then he walked to the minister's house. The minister was in the bathroom, asked the wife, where is the gentleman? And said, he's in the bathroom. Said, he needs to take off because this is the strange call I have received from the head of state. These things have been happening. At some point, someone called me and said, they have told us you've died in an accident. And some radio station in Kampala had announced that I died in an accident.
Okay.
And I told them, look, maybe they are planning it, but I'm not yet dead. And of course, I had to take cover for some days to avoid that
that is
accident.
an account in relation to what happened to you and in relation to what supposedly happened back in 1977.
Yes.
Honorable Semuju, there's a script in the Bible
I was
that
only
says...
telling you that Bishop Janan Luwum, if he had died today, probably he would have died of poison, COVID, because we've still had stories of people who are supposedly dying of COVID, and the account, or cancer, and the account is that they said they have been poisoned. The late Noble Mayombo said he had been killed and poisoned.
So focusing on
the late Speaker Olanya.
Honorable Semuju, the scripture that says touch not the anointed usually has been applied to, you know, the holy men, religious leaders. But then there's also that very same relation to political heads of the state. Now, you earlier alluded to the fact that when President Museveni came into power, his promise was that he would do away with the former chapters that stained this country of blood. One of the weapons of the Bible, and of course we do have the Archbishop Janan Luwum having declared that his weapon at the time of that his death was the Bible. The weapons of the state recurring under different presidents today, arbitrary killings. You do have the unexplained disappearances, abductions, the tortures, really violation of human rights of anybody who touches the anointed.
Before I come to that, if you can allow me, the former Provincial Secretary for the Church of Uganda.
A reaction to Canon Aaron Mwesije.
If I got him right, he was accusing Amin of Islamizing Uganda and having killed an archbishop. An impression is created that maybe Muslims didn't suffer. Haji Aziz Kasuja, former chairman of the Electoral Commission, was arrested under Idi Amin. I spoke to him and he said some of the senior people in government told him it was safer to stay in prison. He had wanted to get out. He said he was in Machindi, military. He said, no, we can get you out, but it was not safe. So you actually are safer staying in prison. And he stayed there. The late Ab Mayanja, the first Muslim to get a degree, told me he was summoned by Idi Amin at command post in Kololo together with another minister whose name I have forgotten. And he told them, my government is running at a supersonic speed. You cannot cope. Hand over to permanent secretaries today at 10 a.m. Said we didn't go home. We didn't even hand over. They ran away. Once a government becomes threatened and bad, as the Honorable Chanji told us one day in Parliament after the death of Nevan, even its own supporters will suffer. In Soroti, when we had a by-election and they were arresting FDC agents, at one polling station they didn't know who the FDC agents were. They also arrested an NRM agent, only to discover at the central police station in Soroti that they had brought also an NRM agent. They appointed another one and this one was released. So the profile of Luwum stands out because this is an archbishop. And people think, at least those ones, even us, we've survived sometimes because of we are MPs. So my arrest is going to be known by everybody. But we live under these threats. I keep remembering the day the Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, we were not MPs yet, when he was telling me to stay home, to run away from home because they were coming for me, and it was past midnight. I said, where do I go? I will make it easier for them to kill me, and they explained maybe it was. So I stayed. It's very difficult to blame anyone. There are people who stayed under me and got killed, but there are also others who ran away. Museveni was one of those who ran away immediately. Took over power because he had been working as a security person in Obote's office. So governments tend to spare high-profile people and then deal with the ordinary souls. That's why the courage with which the regime killed the Archbishop and ministers and other prominent will remain a story that we will read and tell. What the Museveni administration has done, the high profile, either are going to be compromised or they are going to be put under such a threat that many of them will even be the ones calling you to say, please, you need to tone it down. You need to tone down here. My stepmother who died and we buried her in Kalungu kept calling me and saying, Mutawani, they are going to kill you. When she died, I said, you see, even you who was not killed by state, you can die. You can die. So the courage that you can pick an archbishop and kill him stands out.
Was to send a message.
Probably yes, that nobody is safe under me. So you play with my power, I deal with you.
You have talked about high-profile people. Of course, currently the high-profile people that we have in the news for the last 1.5 years has been the MP Janan and Segirinya. Then suddenly the case, of course, coming into acceptance of bail, then being released, the unlawful arrests that have been attached to these profiles. Well, seemingly they seem to be spared, as you have said, yet compromised at the same time. But there are other people who have suffered on the same account, allegedly arrested, brutalized or tortured for that matter. Some have disappeared. All these are continuous recurrences here in Uganda. Now, Honorable Segona, in regards to this, what is allowing these factors to continue exist in Uganda?
You see, I think like the Honorable Samju mentioned that these people are not different. Be it Museveni, be it Obote, be it Amin. They read from the same script, understand the script the same way. Days have changed in that, somebody will at some point allow a person to get bail after 1.5 years. Others may not be allowed. They all rely on the military. But because some people went to school, they find a way of choreographing their things. Now talk about Alan Sewanyana, Honorable, and Mohammed Segirinya. They've been there. They were granted bail in the first place. When they were granted bail, Museveni came out and said, how? This is provocation. They were grabbed again. Actually, prisons did not even release them as ordered by court. It simply handed them over to the military. After moving around and taking them to some places, they said, no, do it different. Charge them with another offense, find an offense. So they found an offense. Charged them again, and other attempts for bail were futile. The same court which had granted them bail said this time round they will interfere with witnesses. The principles remained the same. And now, and of course he kept saying, no. Even so, when we got them out, eventually everybody was saying no. There were negotiations. For heaven's sake, in a country that adheres to the rule of law, there is a constitution, there is a judiciary which is supposed to be independent. How can you even be talking about negotiations? And for me, of course, because I didn't participate or I didn't know of the negotiations, I simply said, how do I negotiate bail? Bail can only be negotiated with court, in an open court where you make submissions and the judge allows. you know, now that they are out, of course the case has not stopped, and I will not want to speak much about the evidence, being a lawyer in the same matter. But how many others are continuing to suffer in Chigo, in Ruzira, in Chitalia, simply again because of their profiles? Okay. Maybe they are ordinary souls, and they are remanded by who? By the military. Because when Museveni noticed that the courts are trying to assert independence, he resorted to the military. He created a kangaroo thing called the military court, and that's where he channels his suspects through. But those are even lucky. To begin with, Priscilla, those are lucky. There are those whose whereabouts are not known.
So we're going to be coming back to pick it up from there, those that are unknown. But then again, what are the remedies at the end of the day? Both of you sit in positions of authority, and you have the power to alter some of these things that are happening to our society today. So when we come back, the seat gets hotter after this break. Stay with us.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
Welcome back from that short break. We do continue with the reflection on 1977, a day that has actually gone on to transform the mindset of the impact of the church, the impact of faith in transformation as well as transition of different governments. Now we want to look at Parliament, and of course these MPs are going to explain to us. They render their services in part to government that they have been, you know, shooting here and there. And so in terms of policies and implementing supervisions, many a times members have been very silent on the things that are, you know, going on in Uganda. Of course, currently the kidnaps, the abductions, the tortures that we're seeing left, right and center, and that most recently the public has brought into debate the fact that they are not seeing you as honorable members of Parliament supposed to represent them and represent their stance of protection as Ugandans, not becoming a reality. So according to them, you are also failing us as Ugandans because policies go through you. Everything practically goes through you. And so you have the power to do something about it. Honorable Semuju, you have been on the floor of Parliament and you stand up to defend Ugandans, but the realities are different.
I told the people in my constituency, the day Museveni unleashed the SFC on us, for me they nearly killed me. We were driven in a minibus through my constituency, through Nigeria, Bulindo, up to Nagarama, where I was detained. What pained me, and I kept telling them, on the day we were in Parliament, physically almost now, stopping Museveni from changing the constitution, they were going over their businesses as if it was normal. They arrested me, drove me through the constituents that I represent. And in the evening, they are on news. Akaongezi, MPs have been arrested. This is a collective responsibility. I don't know of anything that we have not done that anyone can imagine. Stopping them physically. I have been suspended from that Parliament now 4 times. But the outside, they are just, oh, we saw you today. In countries where dictators are removed, the population must have of a necessity participate. That's what happened in Sudan when it came to remove al-Bashir. That's what happened in Tunisia when they were removing Ben Ali. That's what happened partly in Zimbabwe. Of course, the military now joined. That's what partly happened in Egypt and in Libya.
So your defense is that it's a collective effort. We must also
participate. Kept asking us in FDC. His problem was that you are protesting on behalf of the population. They are clapping for you and saying, oh, Mutulwaniride. Maybe because of the price. But I think the population in Uganda will need to be more assertive than it is. And finally, for the Honorable Segona, I think all sectors of society, the church needs to behave the same way churches were behaving in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, in South Africa, in Zambia, civil society and the media. The other day, and I liked what Andrew Mwenda said, when you journalists got beaten, covering the Honorable Kyagulanyi going to the Human Rights Office. And Mwenda said, you see, this is how the NRM works. Today was just your day. So all of us collectively, even the media cannot hide under neutrality, that you politicians go and lead the fight. We all must be fighting, or else all of us are going to be victims.
Honorable Segona, are the people of Busiro East okay? Do they feel that you're doing everything in your power to stop such injustice in Uganda?
You know, the beauty with them is that they are literate. They follow every bit that we do in Parliament. First, it's unfair and it's not factual to say that in Parliament we have kept quiet. We are on record. We have spoken, we have protested, we have even moved out of Parliament, sat on the stairs outside. When I was acting leader of the opposition, I'm on record. I placed those issues on the Hansard of Parliament, so people should read. Secondly, on that day of voting, Tojikwatako, you remember I didn't vote. Together with the Honorable Wilfred Nwagaba, we were bundled onto pickup. For me, I was even thrown in the back. He was lucky he was put in front. We were driven to Chira. And life was normal, like he said. You see, we're only supposed to light a torch and you must start from there. Ugandans must know. I mean, probably I would be dining with Museveni. I would be okay. I mean, we've had colleagues who have, you know, been this side with us. They have crossed and are enjoying life. I chose not to enjoy life when Ugandans are suffering. So Ugandans must know it's about them as well. Okay. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. said, you know, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
So closing this conversation,
nobody is safe.
Picking lessons from Janan Luwum, what lessons do you pick out, Honorable Semujuru? What is the place and importance of religion in shaping the country and protecting the country from injustice?
It's two things. First, I want to complain. You were earlier asking us to account. When the religious leaders, the Mufti, Archbishop, and others under Interreligious Council went to meet Museveni to demand that there must be dialogue to end all these things, Museveni ended up giving, I think, the Catholic Church money for Sako, Movaje money for something, and they all kept quiet. Ask yourself, the church that was demanding a dialogue after 2016, what happened to that church? I am challenging and asking the church, they should be as courageous as Janan Luwum. This country doesn't belong to us, that we have a sole responsibility to sacrifice ourselves. We are the ones on the street. And my appeal to Museveni, I have spoken to Museveni on a talk show like this, pleaded with him. You went to school, you're not Idi Amin. Please do not risk the country. You've been the president for 37 years. Learn from J. Rawlings of Ghana. There can be an end. And you see, Museveni is assured. The wealth he has accumulated with his family. I am one of those who think we must give them peace when they peacefully leave power. And that I want to commit, that Mr. Museveni and your family and all your colleagues, it is possible for all of us to live in a peaceful country, and it is still possible for you to enjoy the same life like you're enjoying as a president.
Okay.
Well, like him, I can only say this country is big enough for all of us. Yes, these people have committed gross atrocities against us. They have offended us. They have robbed and raped our country. But we can still forgive. And it is up to them, really, to exfoliate themselves out of this thing they have cornered themselves. There are people who have lost children. There are people who have lost fathers. There are people who have lost mothers. There are children who can't go to school. There is a head teacher, a school head teacher, who simply said, don't put posters of politicians in this compound of the school because I know I'll be accused. He disappeared. Imagine a school head teacher disappearing under Museveni's watch. You know, I'm even constrained. You notice my tone today is not to call him President Museveni. Why? He has accepted to reduce himself to an ordinary citizen. He can get us out of this. He holds the key. Yes, he successfully rigged this election. He successfully rigged it because we have not done anything. We have not pushed him out. That's not to say we are sleeping. No. But we can still live in this country together. Some people were telling us about dialogue, etc. To go and dialogue about what?
Forgiveness, reconciliation.
To go and tell him to forgive us, or to go and tell him that we have forgiven him. I can now mention we shall forgive him. I have not done anything to him. He has done everything bad to me and to this country. I will forgive him. Let us use the death of Janan Luwum to reflect on where we can go. Finally, somebody sent me a WhatsApp yesterday. A gentleman in Turkey sent a message to his brother saying, I have been evicted by my landlord, saying I should leave his house. So I'm now in a tent, I'm landless. 2 days later, earthquake struck. The same landlord was in the same tent with the tenant. He evicted. He said, we are now both homeless. Yoweri, either you, your son, your grandchildren may be like us very soon. Just prepare for that life. If you can't prepare it for yourself, because, I mean, age may catch up with any one of us. It has already caught up with you. At least your children, prepare for them a good life. I saw Jimmy Akena, you remember in Parliament? When he was pleading, saying, no, my father did not do this. If you do not want your children to be on the defensive, do well today.
Okay.
I thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Honorable Members of Parliament, representing people, speaking on behalf of Uganda for what we can pick out as lessons from this day, the 16th of February 2023, the Janan Luwum Day, giving an account of an interaction that happened then between Idi Amin and the Archbishop. While the Archbishop referred to the Bible as his weapon and the President referred to the gun as his weapon, look where it has brought us as a country today. So perhaps in regards to religion, religion has the power to bring forgiveness, reconciliation, and cause forth change that we want to see. And so it is a call to the religious leaders collectively to actually make sure that they vocalize the injustices that are happening and provide the solutions. After all, the holy books have evidence of these things having existed in times before, and therefore the lessons that they have picked out from there that they teach every Friday, every Saturday, and every Sunday, perhaps they can get those very same lessons, convert them into strategies that they can then share with the government so that the government too can be able to create a harmonious environment for good and our country. Thank you so much for watching Morning at NTV. I am Priscilla Regina Naloga. Good day.